And we're live. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It is Friday. You made it through the week. Congratulations. And if you're joining us for the first time, we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And this is Food Safety Chat Live. My name, Bryan Armentrout. I'm with the Food Leadership Group. And today I'm joined by my good friend, Joseph Laino. Joe, how you doing today?
Afternoon. Did I just say afternoon? Good morning, Brian. It feels like afternoon, doesn't it?
It does already, but based upon the attendance we get in our food safety chat, it's afternoon for somebody. So please, as you're joining the chat, and this is one of the really fun things that we enjoy doing with this, is let us know in the comment section here where in the world you are at. And I am in Loveland, Colorado, where today, Joe, it's going to be a gorgeous day. We had snow yesterday, and today it's back to the 50s. So it's springtime in Colorado. How's the weather in the Carolinas?
It's for the moment not raining. I'm sure that'll change because we've had nothing but rain lately.
It's kind of the weird thing. People who come out to Colorado expect that, they think everybody, and this is, I think a lot due to the tourism ads, is everybody lives in the mountains, and we go skiing to school, and it's like 20 feet of snow outside and those type of things. But actually, Colorado is up against Denver, and the whole metro region where the majority of people live in the state is actually against the base of the mountains, and so people drive up into the mountains on the weekends, but a lot of people don't live there. So. Renee, my assistant, is in here. So Renee, it is afternoon for Renee. So that's a good thing. Renee is in the lovely Philippines. Austin in Denver, good to see you, my friend. And of course, Brian Ravitch, who has also been a guest on this show. Brian, a former FDA official, amazing resource. He works with me at EAS. And I think that's a fantastic segue, Joe, into our sponsor for today's show, Eas Consulting Group. And thank you for the team at EAS. EAS is based here in the U.S., in the Washington, D.C. area, and they have an amazing group of consultants who can help out with pretty much anything. Over 100 people with over 20 years of experience, right? So do the math on that, who can get in there and really help you understand these programs and systems and level everything up. And as part of the sponsorship with this program, which thank you, EAS, is they offer a discount to training. So if you're looking at taking an online course or maybe even bringing somebody in, you can check them out at easconsultinggroup.com/training and look at their programs. And if you find something that you like, put Brian in the checkout in the discount code, BRYAN, and you get an extra 15% off. So, bam, gotta love that. So Tammy's joining us. Always good to see Tammy and her smiling face in our feed. Bruce, hello, Tri-Cities, Washington area. Nice. Thanks for joining us. New face. I love seeing that. Cheryl's here. Cheryl's always here as well. And that's one of the fun things with the chat here is we're really building, Joe, kind of this community of people who get together on Fridays and talk food safety and really help to elevate the program, because one of our central themes with this is that food safety is not a point of competition. This is something that we're all working on together between companies, right? In the minds of the consumer, we're all the same, right? We're making food, we're helping to make sure that families are safe, and we're protecting them, right? And then when a big issue happens, like, oh, I don't know what's going on in infant formula right now, the trust of the consumer goes down, right? And when you're dealing with people's infants and their small daughters and sons, there's no compromise, right? And so we need to always hit those standards and make sure that things are being done correctly. Christopher, good morning, and good old Modesto, been there many times. Pavan in Ontario, nice. I'll be heading up to Canada here in April, so it'll be good to see that. So, Joe, you are with the good old Comprehensive Food Safety, and let me make sure I get your title correct here. You are you are the Supreme Compliance Manager and Food Safety Consultant.
You know why I like doing these chats? Because every time I'm on with you, I'm like, I get a better title. This is, it's great. Pretty soon my head won't fit through the door. So thank you.
Now, with the new titles I bestow upon you every week, are you getting a commensurate increase in salary with that?
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic.
I would work for free. I'm so happy with my job. So.
Tia, good morning. Nice to see Tia, of course, in Baltimore. Very cool. I love the Baltimore's a really cool city, and getting down into the central district down there around the port and things like that. Very cool. Huh. Someone was just trying to join our chat. That was the first time that has happened. Very interesting. So that was almost a crisis. And that's today's topic, crisis management. And so we're going to be having a discussion around, I think, Joe, one of the least understood sections of auditing standards of what auditors are looking for and what it is that you need to do. And one of the things, guys, if you're new to this chat as well, is this is interactive, right? So Renee does a great job of helping to field questions and make sure everything gets answered. But throw your questions and comments in there. We keep a really close eye as we're going along through this conversation. This is for you. So as you have questions about what we're talking about, or you have feedback or resources, share them with the group. It's an amazing way to do things. So as a supreme auditor, you're going out and doing what you do, and people try and get through the crisis management section. Joe, what's one of the things that they try and pawn off on that then as a crisis management exercise?
Well, and it's funny, we were just talking about this before we came on the air. Every time I see a program, or whether I'm working with a client or on the auditing side, they'll present me with this really nifty, slick looking on official document, controlled. It's beautiful. And it's a fire drill. And every time I see this, I try to maintain my composure. And I just simply say a fire drill is not a crisis management tool. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, sure it is. And I said, well, tell me why. And they said, well, God forbid. And I don't know if anybody heard that the Walmart distribution center in Indianapolis on Wednesday of this week had a massive fire. The building was gutted, 1.5 million square feet.
Wow.
They had 1,000 people in the building. Fortunately, everybody got out safely. So in as much as a fire drill, it really is not a crisis test. Remember, the whole goal of your crisis management plan is to be able to look for the potential dangers that can more or less put you out of business. Okay. Now, a fire certainly can. Okay. But the test needs to be for the unforeseen. A fire drill is just that. It's a drill. Okay. Mm-hmm. Even though it may be unannounced to the folks in the facility, somebody planned it. Like the leader of that fire drill woke up this morning and I'm like, ooh, that's right. Look at my Outlook. Today's the day we're going to do a fire drill. So I don't really think that a fire drill is a good tool to see what's going to happen for the unforeseen. Things like flooding and things that happen without notice. And certainly a fire happens without notice, right? But floods, droughts, fire, civil unrest. We know we've got a lot of that going on right now. Mass transit instability. I have a client in New York City who 2 or 3 years ago, the MTA, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, went on strike. Uh-huh. The railroad, the buses, everything just stopped. And half their workforce, takes the subway or the railroad to get to work. So their crisis plan was that they would rent vans from Enterprise or Hertz or whomever and go out and pick up all their employees and bring them to work. So that's that. A crisis plan should be just that. It should deal with the crisis that can impact the site's ability to deliver safe food. And again, I don't want to take away the importance of a fire drill, okay? Because lives depend on the outcome. And this situation with Walmart, and there's videos on YouTube. I mean, this was a raging fire. It burned through the roof. It was bad, really bad. But everybody, thank goodness, everybody got out safely. Nobody was injured. But we need to be thinking above that, beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a crisis for me is not having my morning coffee.
It's just
right?
I couldn't wait.
So everybody, please join us for your favorite beverage.
I couldn't wait any longer. Sorry.
Yeah, I kind of put that off a bit too long. Sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, Walmart is a really great example of crisis management, right? Because I mean, remember back, they have an entire division at Walmart in the logistics group that deals with contingencies and emergencies. And I remember seeing a presentation from Walmart on their systems and how they predict hurricanes and these type of things, and showing, videos when, a hurricane comes up in the Gulf, and they're very accurate on where that thing is going to hit land. And they'll actually position restaging operations just outside of where that is going to hit.
Absolutely.
And then when the distribution centers get hit and they can't supply the stores, or the stores are shut down, those trucks are able to rush in to the point. And I'm not, this is a rumor. I don't know if this is true necessarily or not, but the U.S. government during these type of crisis situations will consult with Walmart and get data from them on what's going on. Their systems are so good.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's Walmart does a lot of things the best out there. To be able to have trucks staged and ready to go to supply warehouses and DCs that are impacted by storms, that takes a lot of planning, and that's the whole point of a crisis management plan. And later, I'm going to tell you a real life incident that I went through at a former employer with our crisis management plan, and we were this close to having it nailed down right, and we forgot to think about the unforeseen. And that's what the impact of these plans are, is to do tabletop exercises about what is and be realistic. Now, if you're in Montana or Minnesota or Arkansas or the heartland, you think about all the things that could go wrong. And I was just at a facility that I was in Minnesota, and they're in their crisis management plan, they listed tsunamis as a potential crisis.
That hits there. We're all kind of done.
Well, and I said to them, I'm like, you get many tsunami warnings here in central Minnesota? Because if we do, then I really think we've got a much bigger problem to be talking about.
Definitely. Yeah. And so it's always amazing how these things change, right? So part of a successful quality management system and how you're looking at food safety and these type of things is preparation. And, it always comes back to integration, right? Never think of your food safety system and your quality management system, these type of things, as standalone units. It's like, oh, okay, I need to have internal audit, and I need to have corrective action, all these type of things. They all work together. And I think, within this section, part of the reason we're talking about this is one of the ones that's kind of overlooked, right? It's like, oh, well, how can I plan for the unexpected? And, if something happens, we'll deal with it, is, general approach. And this is definitely the case when you get into smaller size companies. But part of this is looking at this and saying, what's going on out there in the world that I need to think about? And I think right now, very relevant around this is Ukraine. And we see, the flags and these type of things, and sunflowers, right? Oh, the sunflower is the flower of Ukraine. And, we're all learning these things. Well, guess what we figured out this week through my clients and things of this nature is that sunflower oil, the majority of sunflower oil comes from Ukraine. So one of the things in crisis management they want you to pay attention to is civil unrest and war, and how this can affect your supply chain. Well, guess what, right? We weren't thinking about that as closely maybe as we should have, and said, oh crap, all right, this country just got pulled into a war. Where are we going to get sunflower oil? Now, part of this then too is taking that to the next step and saying, okay, now there's going to be this massive shortage of sunflower oil on the world market. What are prices going to do? Right? It's like we're seeing with everything else, right? It's going to go through the roof. That then becomes an invitation for people to commit food fraud. Right? It's like, oh,
exactly.
Awesome. I can take this cheap vegetable oil and mix in a couple of other things and sell it off as sunflower oil, and they'll never be the wiser. Right now, all of a sudden you've got that problem. Right?
Exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up, because all the bottom dwellers start to come out when it comes to things like these. Raphael raises a point that I'm glad he said it. when you're in central Minnesota and you see, oh, we've got a tsunami concern, that just tells. And I said to them, to Raphael's point, I said, do you have any other sister facilities? Oh, yes, we have one in Seattle. Oh, okay. So did you copy and paste Seattle's? Because I could understand a tsunami being a concern in Seattle.
Absolutely.
So to his point, they copied the documents from somebody without bothering to. So excellent point. Very, very good point.
And that's why, I'll bring this up as a side point on system design and development, is you need to think about, even if you're a single location, you need to design your quality and food safety management systems for the future, right? And you need to think in terms of corporate documents and plant documents. And so in that particular example, right, you would have, let's say, a corporate policy around how we prepare for potential contingencies and disasters, working with the procurement group to have alternate suppliers in place. Because back to the sunflower oil example, the last thing you want is your procurement group running around begging anybody who has it to sell them their sunflower oil. How do you qualify those suppliers, right?
Right.
So then if you think in those terms, then Joe, your documents on your plant side become clearer of what you need, right? It's like, oh, okay, we need to meet the requirements of 264 crisis management under SQF, and it needs to be specific for our facility, right? And you're just not checking the box when you think about it that way. What can really happen here that you wouldn't expect? Now, part of this too, right, is just crazy things that happen. So for example, here in Colorado, like 3 months ago or so, a massive wildfire came out of nowhere and destroyed over 1,000 homes in a pretty residential area headed toward Boulder here in the Colorado area. All those homes and businesses, poof, gone like that. And would you have thought that type of risk, if you had a food facility in that path, that was a risk? Well, they know it is now, right?
Absolutely. It's the things that we have to prepare for. For example, one facility I was at, they're 100 feet away from a Costco, and I mentioned to them, I said, in your crisis management plan, do you talk about your neighbors and look at the impact that your neighbors can have on you? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got Costco right next door. Have you ever been in Costco? They said, of course. I said, how do they keep their cold stuff cold? And they said, oh, refrigeration. I said, okay. I said, what happens if Costco has an ammonia purge right next door? Your ventilation system's sucking the air in from outside. You're going to have ammonia concern. So we need to think about big picture, broad-ranging ideas. And this is why your crisis management team can't, like any other team, and whether it be your HACCP team or your food defense team, it can't be one single function. You have to have a team who, from maintenance, sanitation, engineering, corporate, purchasing, because they've got a horse in that race, human resources, everybody, right? Because everybody's going to come at things from a different perspective, and there's no such thing as a bad idea at that point.
Right. Well, I think part of this too, right, is it's just like recall planning and things of this nature, right? Is it may or may not happen. The important thing is to have a system in place to deal with it if it does. And your ability to 100% predict all of the different scenarios doesn't matter, right? It's more of having a system in place. So for example, a lot of food manufacturing locations are in rural areas or, in older buildings in suburbs, and they have power issues, right? And all of a sudden, they lose power. Right? What do you do? Right now you have equipment in fillers. You have product in fillers, and you have raw milk sitting in storage tanks, and you've got product in the refrigerators, and all of a sudden that product is all exposed. Yeah. If that happens, what do we do? Right. And the last thing you want is what I call hand wringing, right? And it's like everybody sitting around going, oh my God, 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 right? And no one knows what to do. And usually what happens in those situations, right, is the squeaky wheel is the one that starts directing the activities, and that may not be the right person.
To expand on what you're saying, and I think it's important that we all remember this, that a product recall or a food defense, intentional adulteration incident, both of them can create a crisis that brings your crisis management team into play, or into action rather.
Yeah.
So we need to remember that a recall, or if you're issued a 483, anything along those lines could result in your crisis plan, your crisis team being called into action. Having at your fingertips expert advice, whether that be a consultant or somebody from your corporate level, sources of legal advice. And I don't know many companies that keep a food lawyer on retainer. But knowing where they are, who they are, and how to get access to them at a moment's notice is probably a good thing.
Yes.
So it's all of these programs and all of these things that can go wrong, whether it be intentional adulteration, it could be a bacteria outbreak. What the whole purpose of the crisis management plan is to be able to react to things at a moment's notice.
Right. And in order to do that successfully, to build on your point, the time to have a good food safety lawyer that you can consult with is not when the crisis happens, right? You don't want to be looking through the phone book and trolling through the internet,
right,
trying to find somebody to help you. You need to build that relationship in advance.
Yep.
So that when something does happen, you already have that cadence with them. They know your products. They understand how you manage things. They understand who your customers are, and they can give you guidance during that process.
Right.
And what's great about that too, then, Joe, is one of the hidden benefits of that is that person is removed from the situation, right? They're going to be a calm source of reflection. They're going to be asking you questions that maybe you're not thinking of because you're panicking, right? And you're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do with all this? And they're like, well, hold on a minute here. Let's think about this. What type of risks do we have? If the temperature in the cooler goes up, what is the risk to the product? How long is it going to take for a 50,000 square foot cooled warehouse to actually get to a temperature that's going to start bacterial growth in products, right? Those type of questions. They're outside of it, and they can help you reflect and work through those type of questions.
I'm reading some of these comments. Hey, Mario, good to see you. How are you, sir? Thiago raises a good point about the impact of crude oil and how it dramatically affects sugar production.
Oh wow!
All of these. Listen, if what's going on in the Ukraine or anywhere else in the world for that matter, because this is not the only war going on in Ukraine. It's just the most publicized, obviously. Right. All of these could have impacts. Where does all the vanilla in the world come from? Africa. If there's unrest there, and vanilla is a major source of an ingredient for you, so a crisis doesn't have to be a flood or a tsunami or a tornado. It can be on the supply chain side as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and think about the other side as well too, is a lot of food companies ship their product to distribution centers and then on to retailers and these type of things too. What if they have a problem? How are they going to manage your products? Exactly. So the Walmart distribution center burns to the ground and all the product in there. Now, all of a sudden, Walmart is coming back to you and saying, we need replacement product now. We need 50,000 cases of whatever shipped, right? And you're like, right? How do we possibly meet that? Right? Walmart needs this, and that means we need to do this quickly. How do we do it correctly?
If you watch the YouTube video of this fire, this thing spread quick, and I don't I used to be involved in the fire service back in the day, and I know a little bit about fire science, and this thing spread fast. This thing spread really quick. So I'm sure there'll be, you know, all kinds of investigating, but I would imagine all of that product in the warehouse is now garbage. And, you know, at 1.2 million, you know, 1.2 million square feet, there's a lot of stuff in that warehouse. Certainly all the food is condemned. But then you have all the other, you know, consumables and the non-perishables. That's all going to get. So this is a real crisis for Walmart. You know, how are they going to manage it? And that I'm watching this closely. I think supply chain as a topic is fascinating. But I'm following this closely. I want to see where from what I heard yesterday, they're already moving stuff from DCs in California and Florida up into whether for now the weather is stable. They're moving it into the Indy area. And I don't know where the next closest DC is from this one, but it's all being moved there and staged there. So this was a timely topic for this week in light of the fire a couple of days ago.
Right. And so let's say that you have a food manufacturing facility in close proximity to that Walmart warehouse, and you're downwind, and all this toxic smoke is heading your way.
Right. And the DC was only about 3 or 4 miles from Indianapolis Airport, which, as of when I read yesterday, they hadn't had to close the airport. I guess the smoke had dissipated enough by the time it didn't affect air traffic control. But yeah, what if you have what if you're a bakery and you're 4 blocks from that, and now all of a sudden you've got toxic fumes, and so this is again why it's important to know as a part of your food safety plan as a whole, and certainly as a part of an 11.1 of SQF. It talks about doing a site vulnerability assessment. When I write plans for clients, I include a Google satellite view of a 3 or 5 mile radius around their building. And I have one client that there's a crematorium 3 blocks from, and I'm not, but listen, I mean, it's something to think about.
Right.
They've got a crematorium on one side. They've got a Sherwin-Williams paint facility on the other side. So, depending upon which way the wind blows.
Right. Who are your neighbors? Exactly. Well, I think too, a lot of this, and again, these systems all work together, Joe. Think of this in terms of severity and likelihood, right? Okay, we have key materials, key finished product, key customers, these type of things. What are the potential threats? If it happens, what's the severity? And then the likelihood, right? What's the likelihood of something happening with that crematorium? Probably pretty small.
Probably.
But you need to know it's there to make that evaluation.
And there's other things. There's you could have there's a facility that I work with that they're on the edge of a I wouldn't call it a river, but it's a really big stream, and it's probably 20 feet across, and that thing floods at a moment's notice. So flooding for them would be great. Just know what's in your neighborhood that can impact you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So Austin, who lives in here in Colorado as well, brought up earlier here, 500-year floods. And right. So the Johnstown flood here in Colorado was huge. And those aren't supposed to happen very often, but it's happened twice now in my lifetime where this major river system coming in through, a big chunk of the population here in Colorado was impacted, right? So just because it's a 500-year event or 100-year event doesn't mean it's going to wait for year 499, right? It could happen at any time. Raphael makes a good point here as well too. Raphael always makes good points. Right. Lawyer relations are good, right? You need to build with everybody, right? So you need to understand the local fire department and the police and build those relationships, reach out. I mean, one of the things I recommend for my clients is that find out this is a listing, and you can find this pretty easily, of who are the district directors for FDA in your region and who's the recall coordinator, right? Introduce yourself, right? It's much better to have those relationships in advance so they know who you are, and you can at least build a little bit of communication between those groups. That goes a long way. So that's a good point, Raphael. Let's see. Mario says here, crisis management should be a plan of knowing how to react, who to call, and what should be communicated to whom and how. Yep, absolutely. So I think this kind of gets back to what we were talking about earlier of all kinds of things can happen, right? The important thing is to have that mechanism in place and understanding that if these things do happen, how do you react to those? And Mario brings up the example here, right, of COVID, right? Completely altered how we do business. And how does that now impact your crisis systems as well? So that's an important thing to think about. So I did pull up here, Joe, a few of the key points of what SQF is looking for the crisis management program. So the first thing they talk about is who's in charge of making the decision, right? So if something happens, and really they talk about here, and the way I read this, I thought was very interesting, is point 1 under 2641 was a senior manager, doesn't say site, sorry, a senior manager responsible for decision-making, oversight, and initiating actions. It doesn't say a team, right? It's saying who's the decision maker.
Right.
Interesting.
So with any plan, whether it be your food safety plan, your recall plan, you need to have one leader. Okay. Yeah. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean it's the most senior person in the facility, the most senior person in corporate? No, it means it's the person who's best suited to lead that team. If someone's been through 3 or 4 legit crises during their tenure, that might be a really good person to lead the team because they've got the experience, even though they only work for the company for 6 months. The nomination and training then of that team based upon that person leading it. But like any other team, there needs to be just one. There needs to be one name at the top of the chart.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that person needs to be able to hit that button if you need it pressed. So you just alluded to the second point, which was the nomination and training of a crisis management team. So when you're out there in your role as a supreme auditor, what type of pro? I got to do it. I got to poke you.
That's fine.
What type of training do you see for that? How do people prepare?
Every time you say that, my daily rate goes up another $50.
And it should.
So what I do, okay, and I'm just speaking for me, but I know other auditors who do this as well. If your name is on the crisis management team, or the recall team, or the food defense team, I will ask if I can speak with you. I'm going to say, listen, Bryan, you're on the crisis management team, and I'm seeing here on the crisis management list that you are the person that runs around with the broom and stomps on all the rats. That's your job, okay? So I'm the head rat stomper. So I'm going to say, can I please speak with Bryan, or where is Bryan? Let's go find Bryan. And I'm going to say, hey, Bryan, my name is Joe. Nice to meet you. I see here you're a member of the crisis management team. Oh, you're like, oh, yes, I am.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And I go, well, listen, when the proverbial plop hits the fan, what do you do? And I want to hear that you're knowledgeable in your little area of expertise on that plan. That's a well-trained, and I'll ask 2 or 3. I'll ask one person from the crisis plan, maybe one person from the recall plan, maybe one person from the HACCP team. It certainly won't be the leader, because I would hope the leader would know what their role is. But the time for that team to know what their roles are isn't when the crisis is going down. Okay. Right. It's to know about, they meet regularly to talk about, Joe, my job is, I'm the one that liaises with the fire department, or my job is I liaise with our sister facilities to maybe pick up some of the load that we can't carry now. So everybody has a role, and a good auditor will drill on that and say, do you know what you're supposed to do? Because that ties into now so many things, and we're not to get on a tangent, but that ties into management commitment and food safety culture and training and all of these things that go into it. But the team needs to know what their role is before the act takes place.
Mhm. So what type of examples have you seen out there of training? How do people meet the actual training requirement?
It's usually driven by that team leader,
Uh-huh.
okay, or their corporate, or they'll bring in outside sources of advice. I've seen many facilities that will for example, bring the fire department in, and I think Mario mentioned that, or maybe it was Raphael mentioned it, that bring the fire department in and walk with them and show them the facility so that they're aware of how to respond. What did they expect from you
Mhm.
until they arrive? So I think the cross training with all the parties who are involved, that all has to be led by the particular team leader. Um, it's got to funnel through that person, and it's the team leader's job, in my opinion, to be sure that the team is trained. And
Mhm.
you can think about along the lines of like anything paramilitary. Okay, there's a team leader, and
Mhm.
it's that team leader's responsibility to make sure that their team is properly trained for that event. Okay. Um, Similar scenario. We need to make sure as industry that people who we're putting on our teams know what they're doing. How do
Right.
they get that training? There's 100 different ways that they can receive it, but ultimately it comes down to, is the team leader the right person for the role?
Exactly. So would you accept as an auditor, right? You're coming to my plant and I'm the leader of the crisis management team. And you say, okay, Bryan, what type of training have you had and how did you test the system? And so everybody pay attention to that test the system piece of it, because this is something you got to watch out for in version 9, like in SQF, for example, is for food fraud and for crisis management and any type of thing, you have to test those systems now, right? So the auditor is going to say, show me where you went through and did exercises, just like mock recalls and crisis management on that side, you need to test the system as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that my response back to you is, yep, I'm the team leader. So I have some materials that I found online to help work out the activities associated with this. And we did a scenario last month, right? And so all of a sudden, I went into the plant manager's office and said, this is a crisis management training. Power just went out in the facility. Go, right? And then
Yep.
how do we react to these
Right.
type of things? Which is interesting because this is going to bring up other things that are going to overlay with other trainings as well. So one of the things, Joe, that I always recommend for part of your recall management systems and things like this on the food safety side is media training, right? So power's out at your plant and the local news station shows up. Who's gonna talk to them? Who's the representative? What are they
Absolutely.
going to say? Who's going to tell them what to say, right? Is there a communications group within the company that kind of goes through talking points and assigns those? Do you just go out and kind of say, yeah, our power's out, I don't know what we're doing, I'll talk to you later, right? Well, that's not really going to
Right.
instill a lot of
Confidence.
enthusiasm with the public, right? Um, is there a spokesman for Walmart who's talking to the media for their warehouse fire? Oh, 100%, 100% they do, right? So what are you doing to prepare for those things? And so I would go through that scenario and say, okay, power's out. How do we deal with this? What do we do for the products? These type of things, and then document all of those things. And then, of course, right. And once again, guys, you hear me talk about this all the time. What are we doing here? We're doing plan, do, check, act, right? PDCA. Stick to the basics. What's the plan? What are we supposed to do? How did we do it? How do we check to make sure everything went the way it should? And if things didn't go the way we like, how do we course correct and get that back?
Right.
What did we learn from this, right? If you just do the exercise to put it in a book to make Joe happy when he shows up at your plant, who cares, right? That's not the purpose of this, right? The purpose is to prepare yourselves for these eventualities because they can and do happen.
I'm going to tell you a story that is true, sanitized because we don't want
Yeah.
to, right? So years back, during, if anybody remembers Hurricane Sandy, anybody was from the East Coast of the U.S. In 2011, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Hurricane Sandy came up the coast, crippled the New York metro area. At the time, my family, we were still living on Long Island, and 13 days with no power. And I will tell you, like, the first 2 days is cool. Like, you rough it, you grill all your food, you drink all your liquor, and then reality sets in, and you're just cold and hungry.
Yeah.
And there were facilities who had generators on standby to keep their freezers and the product in it frozen. Well, those generators run on diesel. Well, they have a diesel backup. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Facilities ordered diesel fuel in advance of the storm coming, which is a
Mm-hmm.
great proactive step.
Yeah.
And they had arrangements and contracts in place with the diesel carriers to bring, the big 55,000 gallon tankers of diesel. The problem is, when the storm hit, all of Long Island lost power. There were like 4 million people without power. They could not pump the diesel from the underground tanks to the transport tankers. So the takeaway from that was, we had a really good crisis management plan. We were proactive, and we thought in advance that, hey, we're gonna need diesel. We just failed to remember that, how's the diesel getting from the underground tanks? So there was there was a lesson learned, and fortunately we were able to get diesel within a couple of days. The freezers held. So there's room for improvement, right? So this is what I mean about, you can't overlook. There's no such thing as a crazy idea when it comes to setting up your plan to begin with. There's no such thing as a crazy idea when it comes to identifying potential hazards. There's no such thing as a crazy idea when you're going through your tabletop exercise to go, all right, this is going to happen. What if this happens? And then what if that happens? And, if somebody says, well, this could happen, and people go, it's probably a good thing to add to the plan.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Raphael here is talking about the communications piece that we're talking on too, is right. You need to have somebody in charge of communications, right? One point person, 100% right. We all know that when, Joe Biden has something that he wants to talk about, or he wants to get some information out, Jen Psaki, right, the communications director, is the person who goes out and talks with the media and answers the questions, right? She has the information she needs to do her job, and then she communicates that information outward. And that's what you need to do in companies as well. Part of this too is, right, think of this in terms of your house, right? You should have a crisis management program for your house, right? So to your point, right, Sandy comes and there's a giant swell and there's going to be flooding and power outages and wind and these type of things. What are you doing at home to prepare for these type of situations, right?
Yep.
That type of information transfers over into your personal life as well.
And it's funny because the older I get, the more of a doomsday prepper I'm becoming. And I live in South Carolina, and I live in the foothills of the Piedmont Mountains, and we don't get snow, we get ice. Okay. And having grown up in New York City, unless the snow's up to my hip, like, I don't really care. It's just shovel in the plow and go, right. But here, the ice is obviously is a tremendous concern for ripping down trees and power lines. So we had a really nasty January. It was a miserable month. And I don't think it got above freezing. We had nights well into the single digits, which is uncommon for this part of the country. And at the mere forecast of ice, like, I'm the guy that goes out, right? And like, I don't necessarily need milk, eggs, and bread to make French toast when I lose power. But like, I'm the guy that makes sure I've got 10 or 15 gallons of gas for my generator. I make sure my generator works. We had this storm coming through here, and I go to start up my generator and it's dead. And it's got a battery start, thank goodness. I ran to the store, got a new battery. Turns out we never lost power, but okay, like, it was just okay. But I'm on a well, for example, so I always have 3 to 4 cases of water at the ready. If they're calling for a bad storm, like, we'll fill up our bathtub.
Yeah.
So that at least I have water to flush. Okay. So
And
that's just be a little bit proactive.
That's a good point, right? So, okay, yeah, I've got a well. I'm covered. But think of it in terms of your diesel example. Okay, power goes out.
Right, exactly.
How's my pump work?
Right.
Oh.
Right. And there are like, in our last home, for example, we had a what do you call it? A transfer box. I could plug my generator into the transfer, and like it would run my well and my heat. Okay, I don't have that in my current home, and it's a wish list thing. But you have, again, it's great that you're on a well. You have limitless water, right? You have your own private well. Well, that's good. But if you lose electric, how are you getting the pump to run? So it's just thinking about the what ifs and the what ifs and the what ifs, and that translates into our food world.
Mm-hmm.
What if? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's kind of bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level, right? Because as we're looking at the points here in SQL, I think these were good bullet points to help summarize what we're looking at right here. Is you need to have a plan, right? You need to have training for the people who are going to be following the plan, which means you need to test the system. There needs to be, to Raphael's point, there needs to be a decision maker who's leading the team and making the decisions on what you're going to do. There needs to be a lot of concern, especially if you're at a production facility, around if something does happen, how do we make sure that we're maintaining the food safety of our products, right? So an example of that, to your point, Joe, is that if a major ice storm appears to be coming through the area and you're the only production facility, and if you go down, you're going to start compromising your product safety and customers won't be able to get product. Where in your distribution system can you send extra product outside of the path to have that product out of harm's way? Maybe you move all your inventory there. Does it hurt anything? No, right? Is it going to increase costs? Probably not. You needed to ship it there anyway, right?
Right.
If you have customers who pick up, maybe they need to be sent to that distribution center over there, right? Looking at those things. How do you isolate and identify, right? So if you're the crisis manager and you're responsible on that team for food safety, how are you ensuring that the integrity of that product is being maintained?
Exactly.
And if there's any questions as to that, how do you go back and disposition? Do I need to do additional testing? Do I need to send samples out for review? Do I need to throw it away? Right.
Right.
What happens, right? Let's say that you're manufacturing, right? There's product in the lines. There's stuff that's been pasteurized. There's stuff that's not. There's things that's sitting in holding tanks for who knows how long in this scenario. What do you do with that stuff when the power comes back up? You just don't go, and keep manufacturing, right? Who knows what happened in those lines? If you've got staph toxin from, Staph aureus that was growing in there and it's heat labile and it's going to pass through the system, we need to think about that, right? You need to take these things into consideration. So verifying the acceptability of that and documenting it, right? Yep, we went through this and this is okay. We've talked with our outside experts. We've talked with Dr. Marshall at Eurofins, what have you, that we've looked at these things and we're okay. What are your experts for legal and other areas? To Raphael's point, communication and these type of things. Who are you relying on to help you through this? And who is in charge of communication? Right? How do you communicate externally, but also internally, right? How do you let your team members, to your point, Joe, okay, if the plant is shut down in an ice storm, and what do the employees need to do, right? Is a bus going around to pick them up? Do they stay at home and not come into work? What are they expected to do? Because you don't want people just showing up because it's their shift.
Right. Absolutely. And I think to touch on what you mentioned about, who should be on the contact list, and then as far as the integrity of the food, I think it's an absolute must. And it's probably even, I would imagine, a legal requirement that your state Department of Ag or whoever oversees food safety, whatever their title is, they have to be involved. I would think you would absolutely have to have some kind of regulatory sign off on the product that's remaining in the facility, or if you've had to empty everything out and you've had to, gut the facility, God forbid, to rebuild it. That almost warrants an entire inspection from state regulatory. Right.
And that's where having those good relationships in advance is important, right? Because those state regulators, if this happens, right, if a major crisis happens in South Carolina, they're going to be pulled in a lot of directions, right? And if they don't have time during the crisis for introductions, right? Hey, I'm Bryan with so-and-so food company. Yeah, and who the hell are
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Right?
And you are who?
That's too late. So some of the ideas I came up for contacts, right? So customers, right? Your customers, they need to know what's going on. Distributors, local agencies, fire, police, sheriff, all these people. Utilities, don't forget the utilities, right? What are your contacts with the power company or the gas company or things of this nature? Your regulatory contacts, state departments at that next level up, right? Who are those people, right? If you have a major issue, build out that list, right? That's an awesome thing to show compliance to this activities with the auditor when they come in to look at your stuff. And then getting back to normal, right? Getting through that crisis and returning to your normal status, right? That's going to be a challenge. So how do you get to that point? Because odds are, if you have a major catastrophe, you're probably never going to go back to that normal state, right? It's going to impact you in some way.
Correct. And it's I can't agree with you more. I'm just looking at some notes here. I can't agree with you more about having the pre-existing relationships. You know, regulatory, everybody gets afraid of having a relationship with regulatory. I think it's the best thing in the world. It's
Yeah.
You know, they need to know in advance of any crisis, whether it be foodborne, intentional. They need to know that you're reputable and that you take this seriously. And you know, you have that relationship with them, and then that's the time to cash in that chip. When I said, listen, we've been good to you all these years. Now we need your help.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, they're people too, right?
Yep, of course.
And they are going to have good, you know, if they know who you are and they have a good feel for you in advance of these type of things, that's only going to help, right? It's only going to help. So fascinating conversation today on a topic that I think, Joe, a lot of times is put too far down the list of what you need to be doing in your facilities, right? And when these standards are put together, they're put together because these things have happened before, right? It's just not some random, you know, it's like, you know, Leanne at SQF or whatever sitting there going, let's throw in this weird requirement just for fun. No, it's there for a reason, right? These things happen and you need to be ready for them. Right? And that's part of the reason why, and this is kind of a good segue to closing out our talk today, is that's why we do this, right? Are any of us on this call right now, hopefully, right? None of us on this call right now are going through a crisis, but we're now thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. And who even on a map could have told you where Ukraine was 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? Not many people, right? We all know where it is now, right? And being prepared for those things in advance is only going to help, and it's only going to increase your level of appreciation within the company that you work for, right? Because you're helping to think about this, right? We're planning for the future, and those types of things only help. So any questions on this, of course, Renee, my assistant here, is available. So reach out to him on LinkedIn. If you're not connected to Renee, please connect to Renee. When we do these weekly food safety chats, Renee sets up an event, and you can put that on your schedule. And it's a really great way to remind yourself that this is taking place. Because as you can see here from the comments from Mario and Raphael and things like that, being here online for the conversation and getting information from us, but just as importantly, the experts who are on with us, makes the experience that much better. So join us here again next week, next Friday at the same time. So 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain Time for my zone here for the next food safety chat. And we'll dive into our next topic. And of course, in the meantime, we're here to help, right? Our emails are on here. Reach out to us. Joe loves to help and provide information in these areas just like I do. So he's an amazing resource. Use him, right? And as you can tell on these food safety chats, he knows what he's talking about, right? So if you're looking at, doing an audit in your facilities and you need to get that taken care of, reach out to Joe and his team and learn from the experience, right? Because that's always what a good audit is helping to improve, right? It's why we're doing all of these things. Continuous improvement needs to be something that we think about all the time. So again, everybody, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. This makes this so much fun. So thank you again. And Joe, thank you, my friend. I love having you on these chats.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you betcha. So everybody, enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a gorgeous one here in Colorado. I hope the weather is nice and you don't have to do any crisis planning where you're at. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you back here next Friday. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.